Eliza's shop, the Stitch Fix, was usually dead quiet after 9, but she was always clocking in overtime. The place was tiny, a total hole-in-the-wall downtown, smelling like old fabric and cheap coffee. Eliza was 30-something, a little salty around the edges, and honestly, a bit of a loner. Her whole world was needles, thread, and the low hum of the sewing machine. It kept her focused, kept her mind from drifting to the messy divorce and the way she was always grinding to keep Finn legit. The bell above the door jangled just shy of midnight. Eliza was already wiped, ready to call it a night. The woman who burst in was a whole other vibe. She was straight up stunning, the kind of beautiful that looked like she cost $1 million, but her eyes were wild, totally bugging out. She was shaking like a leaf. "Look," the woman gasped, her voice raw. "I need you to fix this like right now. I don't care about the price. Just get it done." She practically threw a blood-red velvet gown onto the cutting table. The material was seriously expensive, probably designer, but it was utterly ripped near the hem. That wasn't the half of it. Right over the side seam, there was a dark, almost black stain, a big one. It looked gnarly. Eliza's gut instantly twisted. This whole situation was way too sketchy. "Ma'am, I'm closing up shop." "This is a massive job," Eliza said, trying to keep her cool. The woman didn't even flinch. She just hauled a huge roll of dough out of her designer clutch. "This is $5,000, she said, practically shouting. 5 stacks of high roller cash. It's yours. Just fix the dress and keep your mouth shut. No cap. $5,000. That was 6 months of rent, maybe more. Enough to get Finn a decent laptop for college applications. Enough to finally chill for a minute. The desperation in the woman's eyes, she looked like she was about to flip out, was palpable. It was all so shady, but the cash was talking, and Eliza was stone-cold broke. "Okay," Eliza finally whispered, sliding the money into her apron pocket. "Give me a name." "Lilith," she said, her voice dropping, suddenly eerily calm. "And you forget you ever saw me." She was out the door before Eliza could even clock her last word. Eliza stood there, the velvet gown a massive, dark silhouette under the shoplight. She hadn't just taken a job, she'd bought herself a secret. The fear was buzzing in her ears, a low, unsettling hum. She knew, deep down, that she had just picked up something way heavier than a sewing project. This wasn't just a torn dress. This was a hot mess, and she was now waist-deep in it. She worked through the night, the cash heavy in her pocket, the dark stain staring back. By sunrise, the repair was immaculate, the stain almost vanished. She just needed a minute to breathe. She barely got one. The next thing she heard was the door open again, and Finn's voice, bright and totally oblivious to the darkness she was sitting in. The minute Lilith's fancy car squealed away, Eliza locked the door and took a massive, shaky breath. She was tripping over the whole scene. $5,000. A literal mountain of paper, rubber-banded into 5 perfect stacks of hundreds. It was sitting right there on the counter, next to the blood-red velvet. That cash was like a spotlight, totally blowing up the moral compromise she'd just made. The whole thing felt so off-the-charts sketchy. Eliza tried to place Lilith's face, running through the mental files of all the rich ballers in the city, but she drew a blank. The woman's panic had been so fierce, it had totally smoked any identifying features in Eliza's mind. She turned her focus to the dress, a meticulous distraction. She was zoning in on the repair, every stitch perfect, the way she always did. But that stain, man. It was like a black hole on the velvet, dark and crusty. It screamed bad news. Eliza felt a wave of icy dread. This wasn't just a party foul. This was some seriously savage business. The stain demanded more than just a quick wash. It required erasure. As she worked, meticulously using a tiny brush and special solvent, the scent of the chemical cleaner was low-key triggering a memory. The memory was raw and quick. 8 years ago. Her ex, Mark, was totally ghosting her. He'd signed the divorce papers, wiped out the joint bank account, and left her and Finn for some younger chick who had a trust fund. He didn't just leave, he made her life a total train wreck. The last thing he'd said to her, right before he was completely toast from their lives, was that she was a failure, always going to be just a glorified mender. That emotional burn, that's what kept her shop open, kept her hustling until midnight, kept her in this constant, desperate state of need. She was always one bad month away from being totally on the ropes. Finn was her world, and she was clutching at the idea of getting him through high school without him knowing how close they were to disaster. The silence, the secrecy, it was the only way she knew how to protect him. She pushed the memory down hard, her eyes snapping back to the present. The cash on the counter was the reason she'd said yes to the shady deal, the desperate solution to years of being left in the dust. It was proof that sometimes, a stack of money could totally override your common sense. By 6 a.m., she was done. The dress was immaculate, the stain gone, or at least hidden so deep in the velvet, you'd need a microscope to find it. She wrapped it up tight, the paper rustling like a guilty conscience. Just as the sun began to peek through the dusty window, the front door opened again. She hadn't even had time to crash. "Hey, Mom. You're up early," Finn said, his voice cheerful, totally unaware of the bomb she was sitting on. He tossed a couple of donuts onto the cutting table, and then, without thinking, he handed her the morning edition. "Check this out. This story's all over the news. Total drama." Eliza took the paper, her eyes immediately finding the giant, bold headline. The repair kit slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the floor with a tiny clatter. The feeling of the cash in her apron pocket suddenly turned from warmth to poison. She was speechless. The silence stretched, loud and deafening, setting the scene for a total meltdown. Eliza's insides were completely wrecked. She hadn't actually slept, just faded in and out, the image of that dark, glossy velvet dress totally messing with her head. It was like her brain had been running a high-speed projector of the stain all night. Then Finn, her dope kid, walked in. He was a good egg, smart, sensitive, the kind of guy who noticed if she'd only had 3 hours of sleep. He put a greasy paper bag on the counter. "Got you a couple of chocolate bombs from the joint down the street," he said, and then tossed the newspaper down like it was yesterday's recycling. "Yo, Mom. You good? You look like you got 0 ZZZs, Finn asked, genuinely worried. Finn was 17, but he felt older than his years. He was onto her, always noticing the way she kept everything locked down, keeping a mile-wide distance between herself and everyone else since the divorce. "I'm straight, Finn. Just a late night," Eliza lied, her hand already inching toward the front page, unable to look away from the banner headline. Finn pointed a finger at the center of the paper. "Check out this madness. This dude, Marcus Vane, disappeared after some bougie charity gala last night. Huge deal. He's some philanthropist OG, big money, big connections. The cops are all over it. Total scam or something worse." Eliza's world slowed down. Marcus Vane. Charity gala. Last night. She felt a cold, hard knot form in her chest. She remembered Lilith mentioning the party, her panicked movements, the sheer desperation. She glanced at the small, grainy photo at the bottom of the article. A crime scene shot of the entrance, blocked off by yellow tape. And then she saw it. A quick shot of a cleanup crew near a velvet rope. The caption mentioned something about evidence markers. But what caught her eye was a tiny, zoomed-in inset photo right beside the text. It was a close-up of the red carpet. In the corner, barely visible, was a small, torn piece of fabric. It was the unmistakable, deep, blood-red velvet. The exact same shade. The exact same material. A choked sound escaped her throat. She wasn't just fixing a dress. She was destroying evidence. "Mom, you okay?" "You went totally ghost," Finn pressed, suddenly serious, his perceptive eyes zeroing in on her reaction. Eliza pulled the paper closer, her heart absolutely pounding a crazy rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't speak. All she could do was stare at the headline, putting the final horrific pieces together. The rich guy disappeared, the frantic woman, the $5,000, and the dark stain. The dress she had painstakingly cleaned and repaired wasn't just ripped, it was implicated. She managed a shake of her head, trying to look normal, trying to play it cool, but she was already freaking out inside. She had to ditch the paper, ditch the thought, and deal with the dress. She needed to hide the cash and, more importantly, hide her own guilty fear before Finn caught on. The quiet panic of the previous night had just exploded into a full-blown emergency. Her only goal now was to make sure Finn didn't catch her vibe. I gotta start on the big order, honey, she stammered, folding the paper fast, trying to dismiss the massive truth it held. The lie had begun. The truth, wrapped up in red velvet, was about to become her new normal. Finn was already out the door, yelling, "See ya, Mom. Don't stress," before Eliza could even manage a full sentence. She watched him walk away, feeling a sudden raw fear that she'd never see him again because of the mess she was in. She slammed the door shut and locked it, her hands trembling so bad she almost dropped the key. This wasn't just some random chick trying to fix a party dress anymore. This was a cover-up for a major dirtbag move involving Marcus Vane, the big-time name on the front page. Lilith, the woman with the wild eyes, was undoubtedly tied up in Vane's disappearance, probably the one who clocked him. Eliza knew she couldn't call the cops. Not yet. She'd taken the $5,000, the blood money, and that made her an accomplice, a total shill. If the police found the dress and the cash, she was toast. Finn would be left alone, his life completely trashed by her bad decision. That thought, leaving Finn to deal with the fallout, was the one thing that made her go full ninja mode. First things first, the dress. She grabbed the velvet gown, still wrapped tight, and the massive stack of cash. She couldn't just leave them out in the open. She bolted into the tiny back room, which she used as a utility closet, and found an old sturdy metal cabinet that was usually filled with spare zippers and thread spools. She shoved the velvet dress deep inside, behind a bunch of dusty boxes. Then, the money. It felt disgusting in her hand, thick and heavy. She opened the small safe deposit box she kept hidden at the bottom of the cabinet, the one she used for emergency cash, and crammed the $5,000 inside. The sound of the tumblers clicking felt final, a commitment to her secret. Click. The lock was solid. Click. The lie was sealed. All morning, she was a wreck. She couldn't focus on the real work. She kept jumping at every sound, every passing siren making her heart absolutely spaz out. This sudden sharp shift in her mood was a huge red flag to Finn, who was perceptive like that. When Finn came back in the afternoon, she was already spinning her first plausible lie. He found her staring blankly at a half-finished wedding veil. "Hey, Mom. You look spacey. Everything all good?" Finn asked, leaning against the counter. Eliza tried for a small smile, but it felt like sandpaper. "Yeah, kiddo. Just this huge new commission came in. It's for a client who's super high maintenance, needs a wedding dress overhaul by tomorrow morning. It's a total rush job." "But you don't do bridal, right? You said they're too much drama," Finn countered, his eyebrows raised. He wasn't stupid, he was calling her out, albeit gently. Eliza's voice hardened slightly, a subtle but significant change in her tone, the first sign of the emotional manipulation creeping in. "Well, I need the cash, Finn. It's a sweet deal. Don't worry about it, okay? Just let me concentrate. I'm under the gun here." She turned back to the wedding veil, using the work as a shield, putting up a massive emotional roadblock between them. She was essentially telling him, "I'm too busy and stressed for your questions. Back off." She had to make him believe her sudden anxiety was about a stressful job, not about a potential murder rap. She was sacrificing their honesty, their closeness, for the sake of her safety, and his. By the time the sun started setting, the tension in the shop was so thick you could cut it with a seam ripper. Eliza was running on pure adrenaline and fear. She knew this was only the start. Her panic was a ticking time bomb. She was just about to bail on the wedding veil to check the cabinet lock one more time when the sound of a heavy, insistent knock hit the glass door, totally rattling her. It wasn't the usual gentle jingle of the bell. It was an official, authoritative thump. She looked up, her blood turning to ice water, and saw a dark silhouette standing outside, the kind of dude who looked like he meant serious business. The police were here. Her time was up. Eliza's heart was absolutely doing the tango in her chest. That knock was too heavy, too deliberate to be a customer looking for a quick fix. She wiped her sweaty palms on her apron, straightened her spine, and pasted on her most professional, utterly clueless face. She took a breath and unlocked the door. Standing there wasn't some beat cop. This was a detective, no cap. Tall, serious, wearing a suit that was definitely not off the rack. He had these intense laser beam eyes that seemed to just cut through her whole act. This was Detective Eliza Thorne, and his vibe was totally unnerving. Focused, calm, and 0% messing around. "Eliza Vance? The Stitch Fix?" Thorne asked, his voice low and smooth. He flashed his badge, the gold glinting in the shop's dim light. "Yeah, that's me. What's the deal?" Eliza kept her tone flat, trying to sound bored, like this was just another annoying interruption. Inside, she was screaming, "He knows. He knows about the dress and the 5 stacks of cash. We're just canvassing the area, ma'am." "About the Marcus Vane case," Thorne said, stepping inside without being asked. His eyes immediately went past her, checking the cramped space, the counter, the sewing machine, the dark corners. He wasn't aggressive, which was somehow more terrifying. He was just methodical. "Right. The disappearing rich dude," Eliza replied, trying to sound like she was only vaguely familiar with the local gossip. "I was closed last night. Slammed the door at 9. Didn't hear or see anything out of pocket. Did anyone approach you late? Say, asking for an emergency repair? Maybe someone who was particularly agitated?" Thorne asked, his gaze settling on the cutting table where the velvet had sat just hours ago. He was throwing out the perfect question, and Eliza felt her composure starting to dip. "Nah, nothing like that. Just me and my machine, vibing till close," she lied smoothly, trying to remember if the surveillance camera she had installed after a minor break-in was even hooked up. The camera, mounted high above the door, felt like a massive glowing beacon right now. Thorne didn't look at her when he asked his next question. Instead, his eyes drifted upward, slowly, deliberately, straight to the small, cheap security camera she hadn't bothered to check in months. He didn't point it out, didn't say a word about it, but the simple action was enough to make Eliza feel like he was practically running the tape in his head. That small, cold look totally amped up the tension. "We appreciate your time, Ms. Vance. Just trying to piece together the events before Mr. Vane went ghost," Thorne said, turning toward the door. The way he used the name Vane made the disappearance feel solid, real, and totally linked to the velvet dress currently hidden in the locked cabinet behind her. As he reached the door, he paused, his hand on the knob. "One more thing. You have a son, right? Finn." Eliza froze. The power dynamic had just totally flipped. She was no longer just the seamstress on the block. She was the nervous mom with something to protect. She was now a suspect in her own mind. "Yeah. What about him?" Her voice was sharp, a natural protective reflex. Thorne gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Nothing, ma'am. Just saw his name on the local school roster. Good kid. Tell him to keep his nose clean. Have a good day." And with that, he was gone, leaving Eliza standing in a silence that was 10 times louder than his intense questioning. He knew Finn's name. It was a subtle threat, a way of letting her know that her life wasn't hers alone, that the people she cared about were now officially on his radar. Eliza bolted to the back room, pulling out her old phone. She had to call Lilith. She had to tell the woman she was officially freaking out because the cops were all up in her business. She needed the next step, and she needed it now. The secret was getting way too hot to handle. Eliza was officially freaking out. Thorne's visit had totally rattled her, especially the part where he dropped Finn's name. She was in the back room, her hands shaking as she punched the digits into her old throwaway burner phone. She needed to tell Lilith that the cops were circling like vultures, and they needed to lock down their story. The phone rang twice, then a voice, low and aggressive, snapped, "What the heck do you want?" "It's Eliza, the seamstress." The detective was here, Lilith. "He knows the block, he knows the time, and he mentioned my son," Eliza hissed, trying to keep her voice down but unable to hide the sheer panic. "He's onto us." There was a dead silence on the line, thick and heavy. Then Lilith's voice came back, cold as ice, totally devoid of the panic she'd shown the night before. This was a different woman, a calculating boss. "Listen to me, you chump. You keep your mouth shut. You say nothing to that pig. Nothing about the dress, nothing about the cash," Lilith ordered. And yeah, the stain. It was blood. Marcus was getting gnarly, and I shut him down. You got it. You are my insurance now. Eliza's breath hitched. She knew it, but hearing it, the stain was blood, a wealthy man was gone, and she was an accessory to murder, was a whole other level of terror. Lilith had completely played her. This wasn't just betrayal, it was being used as a disposable tool. I need that dress back like yesterday, Lilith continued, her voice turning into a dangerous, low snarl. If you spill the tea, or if you even think about messing with me, I know where your shop is. I know your kid's name. Finn. Think about that, Eliza. You got that, honey. The threat, raw, direct, and aimed right at Finn, totally changed the game. Eliza's fear turned instantly into cold, protective rage. She wasn't just covering up a crime anymore. She was defending her family. I got it, Eliza clipped out, her voice now flat and solid. Don't call this number again. She slammed the phone down, her mind already racing with a new, urgent plan. The locked metal cabinet wasn't safe. The cops could get a warrant and bust it open like it was nothing. The dress was too hot. It needed to disappear completely. She grabbed a crowbar from the utility closet and dragged a wobbly wooden ladder into the attic space above the shop. The attic was just a dusty, neglected crawl space, full of old inventory. Perfect. She climbed up, the air thick and warm, and zeroed in on the spot directly over her sewing table. It was the least likely place to look. Swinging the crowbar, she found the seam where two old, warped floorboards met. She jammed the end in, gritting her teeth, using every ounce of her stress-fueled energy. The wood splintered and screamed, but she didn't care. She was going hard now. She managed to pry up two of the floorboards, revealing the dark, dusty void beneath. She retrieved the velvet dress from the cabinet, wrapping it in an old plastic trash bag for extra protection. It felt heavy, a massive physical reminder of her terrible mistake. She shoved the bundle down into the hole, pushing it deep into the insulation and dust, making sure it was completely out of sight. She then jammed the floorboards back into place, nailing them down just enough to look normal. She had just buried the truth. But Finn was still out there, unaware. She was protecting him with a lie, a betrayal of their honesty. Now, she needed to make sure her own kid, with his sharp, perceptive eyes, didn't accidentally dig up the dirty secret. She had to sell the illusion of the stressed-out seamstress perfectly. Finn was bugging out over his mom. She was officially running on fumes, looking totally wiped and jumpy every time a customer walked in. The vibes she was giving off were totally sketchy, all that talk about a high-roller wedding dress client when she usually swore off bridal work. Finn wasn't dumb. He was woke to the fact that her story was a massive cap. His mom was too straight up to suddenly start telling lies unless something seriously messed up was going down. Since the Detective Thorne visit, Finn had gone full super sleuth. He was obsessed with the Marcus Vane disappearance, spending all his free time on his laptop, deep diving into the case. He was low-key dreaming of being a big-shot investigative journalist, and this local drama felt like his moment to shine. He'd noticed the way his mom had gone ghost when the detective mentioned Vane. It all felt way too connected. He knew something was hidden, and the shop was the obvious spot. He started checking where her eyes always darted, the tiny utility closet, the dusty corners. One afternoon, while Eliza was out grabbing a quick bite, a rare move for her, Finn hauled the old wooden ladder into the back room. He climbed into the cramped, hot attic, figuring if something was on the low, it would be up here. The air was stale, smelling like old mothballs and fabric dust. He started looking, pulling aside boxes of vintage buttons and old spools of thread. His eyes landed on the floorboards right above the main shop. One section, only 2 boards wide, looked too neat. The nails were slightly shinier, and the wood grain didn't match the rest of the janky floor. Bingo! Using a sturdy screwdriver, Finn carefully worked the newer nails free. He didn't want to leave any marks. He felt his hands trembling with adrenaline. This was the real deal. He pried up the 2 boards, and the dust-filled void beneath was revealed. There it was. A tightly bound plastic trash bag, shoved deep into the insulation. It was heavy, and it reeked faintly of the chemical solvent his mom used. He pulled it out, untied the knot, and unfolded the contents. The sight of the fabric made him gasp. It was the deepest, darkest, hottest red velvet he had ever seen. He touched the material. It felt stiff, repaired meticulously, but the material itself was unmistakable. That velvet dress. Finn's mind instantly flashed to the tiny photo in the newspaper. The crime scene, the red carpet, and the piece of torn fabric. It clicked. His mom hadn't just fixed a dress. She had hidden a piece of evidence from a potential murder. He stood there, completely paralyzed by the weight of the realization. He quickly rewrapped the dress, shoved it back into the hole, and hammered the boards back down, making them look seamless. He had his forbidden secret now, one that connected his stressed-out mom to the disappearance of Marcus Vane. He didn't know the why, but he had the what. He knew he couldn't confront her yet. She was too fragile, too deep in the lie. But he wasn't going to let it go. He was going to find the real story. He was going to find out what Marcus Vane meant to his mom. Eliza was officially coming undone. The whole thing, the velvet, Lilith's threats, Thorne's quiet scare tactics, had pushed her past her breaking point. She was running on E, surviving on coffee and pure, uncut anxiety. She'd always been the MVP of the meticulous, the kind of person who could fix a seam in the dark. But now, her game was slipping. The inevitable happened while she was working on a bougie client's custom dress, a simple adjustment for a woman named Mrs. Harlow. Eliza was supposed to be shortening the sleeves, but her mind was totally fried, stuck on the thought of Finn finding the dress. Her hand slipped, the sharp shears biting deep, not into the fabric, but into the palm of her hand. Blood bloomed instantly, a nasty bright red stain spreading across the crisp white cotton of the sleeve. "Dang it!" she muttered, clutching her hand. It was the first time she'd ever damaged a client's garment, a total rookie move. The error, the blood, it was a full-blown meltdown. She had to stitch the cut on her hand, then frantically try to clean the stain she'd just created, the irony of the situation totally wasting her. She was obsessed with hiding one bloodstain only to create another. Finn walked in later, dropping his backpack with a thump. He was watching her, totally silent, his eyes laser-focused. He saw the tight bandage on her hand and the look of pure exhaustion etched onto her face. He knew the job was a total bust, not a rush order at all. He decided to test the waters. "Hey, Mom. I was reading more about that Vane dude. The gala he disappeared from? It was a massive deal. Think anyone at the party could have been, like, set up." Eliza froze, scissors mid-snip. She didn't look up, but her jaw was clenched tight. "Finn, I told you. I don't know anything about that drama. I'm too swamped with work to read the papers. Just drop it." "But like, it was for charity," Finn pressed, casually moving closer to the area where the cabinet had been. He was trying to catch her out. And Vane was a total A-lister. Imagine the person who knows what really went down. They'd have to choose between keeping silent or doing the right thing, right? "Justice is huge, Mom." Eliza snapped, the psychological tension finally breaking. She slammed the scissors onto the table. 20% dialogue. The right thing. "You think it's that simple?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "Justice doesn't pay the rent, Finn. Justice doesn't keep a roof over our heads. You don't know the half of it, kid. You don't know what it's like when the whole world is against you, and you have to make a choice. I know you're hiding something. I saw how you were acting when the detective was here." Finn shouted back, dropping the act. "Why are you always pushing me away? I'm not some little kid. We're supposed to be a team, but you're treating me like a liability. I'm keeping us safe. You think I want this? I did what I had to do." Eliza yelled, immediately regretting letting him see her totally lose it. Finn took a deep breath, his voice softening, but his words hitting harder. "No, Mom. You did what you thought you had to do for money. But now, it's about the truth. The dress, the lie, the secret. It's going to mess us up more than being broke ever could. We need to choose justice over fear, Mom. For real." His demand for honesty, for justice, hung heavy in the air. Eliza was suddenly facing a battle on two fronts. the police and Lilith outside, and her own perceptive son demanding she stop the emotional manipulation inside. Her walls were crumbling. She knew the secret wouldn't hold. Finn had put her on notice. She was running out of time before he figured out the final, painful link. Finn was back on his laptop, trying to process the massive bombshell from his fight with Eliza. He knew his mom wasn't a killer, no cap, but she was definitely hiding something major about Vane. He figured the key wasn't the present crime, but the past connection. He started deep diving into the archives of Vane's company and old society pages, searching for anyone associated with Eliza's name, or even her maiden name. He was going full nerd mode, running cross-references and clicking through ancient digital photo galleries from charity events Vane used to throw. Most of the pics were just rich dudes looking all bougie, but Finn was patient. Then he saw it. An old auction photo, circa maybe 10 years ago, from Vane's annual foundation gala, the same one Vane had disappeared from. The caption was just some blah about the winning bidder. But Finn's eyes weren't on the bidders. They were in the background. 20% description. There, standing slightly apart near a velvet curtain, looking like a total ghost in an expensive but simple black dress, was a younger Eliza. She looked stunning, but her face was a masterpiece of controlled sadness. She wasn't smiling or chatting. She was completely zoned out, staring right past the camera with an expression that was pure, raw heartbreak. Her posture was rigid, almost protective, like she was waiting for a massive storm to hit. It was his mom, but a version he'd never seen, the version before the divorce, before the walls went up. "Whoa," Finn whispered, leaning in. He zoomed in on the picture, his mind running a mile a minute. Why was his mom at a high-end gala hosted by Marcus Vane? She hated that kind of snooty crowd. This wasn't just a professional slight. This was personal trauma. He realized Vane wasn't just some random rich guy on the news. Vane was a part of his mother's baggage, a wound that had never truly healed. It had to be a forbidden love that went wrong, or maybe Vane had done something incredibly shady that had hurt her financially or emotionally back in the day. The plot twist was hitting him hard. The guy she helped conceal the murder of was the same guy who probably broke her heart or screwed her over a decade ago. He kept digging through the photos around the same event, and found another one that cemented his theory. Eliza was briefly standing near Vane, and Vane was looking at her with a smug, possessive smirk, a total creep vibe. The picture showed the clear power dynamics at play. She was vulnerable, and he was completely in control. Finn shut the laptop. This revelation was a huge game-changer. It explained the secrecy, the sudden willingness to take the blood money, and the intensity of her breakdown. His mother wasn't protecting a murderer she just met. She was protecting herself from the fallout of her own painful past, and maybe getting some deep-seated delayed revenge. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't just keep dropping hints. He had the missing piece, the tie-in. He had to use the photograph, this hidden connection, to force her to finally spill the tea. He needed a straight-up, knockdown, drag-out confrontation. He had to show her that the truth about Vane had been waiting in her past all along. He closed his eyes, preparing himself for the inevitable explosion. He was going to bring up Vane, and he wasn't going to back down. The reckoning was coming. The shop bell jangled, and this time, it was a whole crew. Detective Thorne was back, looking even more stone-cold than before, and he wasn't alone. He had 2 uniformed cops and a piece of paper that looked seriously official. A search warrant. "Ms. Vance, we got a warrant based on an anonymous tip about unusual late-night activity. We need to check your premises," Thorne stated, his eyes flicking around the shop, checking out every dark corner. Eliza felt a total wave of panic, but the previous chapter's fight had actually made her stronger, more grounded. She stood rigid, trying to look bored. "Go for it, detective. You'll find nothing but threads and disappointment." She knew the dress was safe, buried under the floorboards she'd fixed. The cops spent a tense half-hour tearing the back room apart, checking the cabinets, lifting loose boxes. They even searched her massive spool collection. Thorne was zeroed in on the area where the cabinet used to be, but Eliza's frantic attic work had paid off. They found zilch. Thorne dismissed his backup and then turned back to Eliza, his intensity ratcheted up to 11. "Come on, Eliza. Cut the cap. We know you saw something." We know someone was here. Protect yourself, not them. You're wasting our time. I told you I was closed, Eliza said, trying to hold his gaze, but she was starting to shake. He was too close, too persistent. Just as the pressure became unbearable, Finn walked in. He saw the tension, the frustrated cop, and his mother's pale face. He knew he had to step up. Detective Thorne, Finn said, his voice surprisingly steady. You're looking for a connection to Vane's disappearance, right? Well, you should know that Marcus Vane was a total dirtbag who had a messy history with a lot of people in this city. Including my mother. Thorne snapped his head toward Finn, his eyes narrowing. Oh yeah. And how do you know that, son? Finn didn't even look at Eliza. He just kept his eyes on the detective. Let's just say I know my mom used to roll in those circles a while back. He caused her some serious grief. You're looking for a stranger. You should be looking at the people he already burned. The distraction worked. Thorne, completely sidetracked by the new information, stepped back, looking thoughtful. Get this kid's name. Officer. Thanks for the intel, Finn. He left, the threat now diffused. Eliza watched the door slam shut, then slowly turned to face Finn. Her eyes were full of both terror and a fierce gratitude. You had no right to do that. You don't know what you're doing, she yelled, her voice breaking. Finn pulled out his phone and shoved the old auction photograph, the one showing her heartbroken face, right in front of her. No cap, Mom. You don't know what you're doing. What did Vane do to you? And who is Lilith, really? Eliza saw the picture and the final wall collapsed. She sank onto her stool, completely defeated. 20% dialogue. Okay. You're right. I did know him, she confessed, her voice a raw whisper. He was a creep who messed with my life years ago, right when I met your dad. He stole my savings and basically left me for dead professionally. I never got over it. She looked up, eyes brimming with tears. And Lilith. I didn't know he was dead, Finn, I swear. But when she came in with that dress, I recognized her. She's his wife, Finn. Lilith Vane. And I knew, the minute I saw her face, I knew why she hated him. He kept her on a tight leash, totally controlling her life and her money. He'd been manipulating her for years. I saw the same dark vibe on her that he used to have. I took the dress because a part of me wanted him to get what he deserved. The truth was finally out, a hidden connection of trauma and vengeance. The red velvet dress was Lilith's proof, but it was Eliza's closure. Now that the emotional bombshell had dropped, Finn finally understood the depth of her secrecy. They were both in too deep, but they were finally together in the truth. Finn grabbed her hand, the one with the bandage. Okay, so we protect ourselves, but we do the right thing. Tell me everything you know about Lilith and Vane. The next step wasn't hiding the dress. It was deciding whether to expose the killer and face the consequences, or keep the secret and live with the guilt. The final stitch had to be the truth. The whole shop was heavy with the truth. Eliza was totally raw, and Finn was sitting right next to her, not judging, just listening to the whole backstory of Marcus Vane's betrayal from a decade ago. It was a total mess of emotional baggage and power moves, all leading up to Vane's wife, Lilith, finally snapping and calling for a midnight stitch fix. So Vane basically low-key wrecked your life, and then his wife finished the job, Finn summarized, his voice flat. And we're sitting here on evidence that could nail her. We can't just snitch, Finn. She threatened you. If we turn in the dress, she'll know it was me, Eliza pleaded, the old fear still gripping her. Finn shook his head, looking her straight in the eye. Nah, Mom. We're in this deep, but we're not going to let a killer run free because we're scared. That's how this whole cycle started. We stop the manipulation now. You already paid the cost of silence. We call Thorne, we tell him about the dress, and we tell him why Lilith went completely off the rails. 60% narration. Finn's resolve was the anchor Eliza needed. Seeing her son, the one she had desperately tried to protect with lies, now demanding honesty and justice, finally dissolved her fear. She realized that the most valuable thing she could inherit from this whole nightmare was the profound, honest bond with Finn. The real wealth was in their trust. They grabbed the crowbar, went back to the attic, and retrieved the tightly wrapped, blood-red velvet dress. They called Detective Thorne, arranging a meeting at the shop, but on neutral ground, the park across the street. When Thorne arrived, Eliza put the stained, repaired dress right on the hood of his sedan. It was Lilith Vane. She brought it in the night Marcus disappeared. Eliza confessed, her voice shaking but solid. She was fuming, and she paid me $5,000 to make it disappear. But the real intel? Marcus Vane had been totally screwing her over for years, controlling her money, keeping her totally isolated. It was an abuse of power, a cruel one. That's the real reason he's gone. They gave Thorne the full rundown, the whole painful truth about Vane's manipulative history with both women, establishing a clear motive for Lilith. Thorne looked at the dress, then at Eliza and Finn, a flicker of something close to respect in his eyes. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Lilith Vane was apprehended hours later, the velvet dress serving as the key piece of evidence in connecting her to the scene. The $5,000 was confiscated as evidence, leaving Eliza financially back at square one, but she didn't care. The police, recognizing Eliza's coerced involvement and her eventual cooperation, treated her as a witness, not an accomplice. The cost was high, the fear, the near breakdown, the loss of the money, but the gain was priceless. Eliza closed the shop early that night. She didn't turn on the sewing machine. She just sat with Finn on the counter, eating cold pizza. 60% narration. Their arguments were gone. The secrecy was gone. Finn finally saw his mother, not just as the hustling seamstress, but as a survivor who had fought a low-key war against a total dirtbag. "I'm sorry I lied, Finn," she said quietly. "I know, Mom," he replied, leaning his head on her shoulder. "But we fixed it. We're good." Eliza looked around her small, simple shop. It was still a hole in the wall, but now it felt like a home, finally clean of the secret. The final stitch had been the truth, and it had mended the only thing that truly mattered, their relationship. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wouldn't face it alone. She was ready to face the world, one honest, unadulterated day at a time. The real work of healing, she knew, was just beginning.